I call this meeting to order. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to meeting number 86 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Veterans Affairs. La réunion d'aujourd'hui se déroule donc sous forme hybride. Il y a des députés qui participent avec l'application Zoom.
Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the standing order, and members are attending in person and through Zoom. Although this room is equipped with a powerful audio system, I would ask you to please be careful not to let the earbud get close to the microphone because it can cause interference and can cause substantial harm to our interpreters. Accordingly, I ask you to please be careful about that. And today, before we begin, I would like to inform members of the team that you have received earlier the draft report on women's veterans experience. So we have Wednesday this week. We will continue the study on transition to civilian life, and the witnesses have already been advised. And I also would like to inform the committee members that it is also important for us to establish our work calendar, because we have with us 6 studies pending. So the motions have been carried, and we have at least 26 motions that have been filed by members. So it would be good if, after returning from 2 weeks of time spent in the writings, that I could give instructions to the analyst and the clerk as well to be able to assist us in our work plan right up until the end of the session. Accordingly, there we are. So I must also mention that we have the supplementary estimates.
Plans also. Voilà. Donc,
so there you are. So let us begin. Mr. Richards has raised his hand. Mr. Richards.
Thank you. And I'd like to see us return to where we were at the last meeting. Unfortunately, it seemed to be a bit of a filibuster on the part of the Liberals, but I would like to move my motion again that I put on notice on December 20th in relation to the production of all the documents around the Prime Minister's interference in the national monument to the mission in Afghanistan. And so I would move that motion once again so that we can carry on the debate with that, Chair.
Yes. Okay. So,
point of order, Mr. Chair.
Point of order?
Yeah. As this motion has already been moved, I believe the appropriate thing to do would be to move to resume debate, which would require an immediate vote.
Exactly. So we're going to have to vote on that and come back after that on that motion. So, yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I'm going to ask the clerk to take the vote on that motion, please.
Mr. Kissy?
Opposed?
Ms. Hefner?
Opposed.
Mr. May?
No.
Mr. Miao?
Opposed?
Mr. Sarai?
Opposed?
Mr. Doddle?
In favor.
Mr. Richards? Mr. Tolmy?
In favor.
Ms. Wagen?
In favor.
Monsieur Desilets?
En faveur.
Ms. Blaney?
In favor.
Yes, 6. Contre 6. No, sorry, nays. Yes, 6. Oui, 6. Nays, contre 5.
Merci. Donc, la
Thank you.
motion.
So the motion as presented by Mr. Blake Richards has been carried. So I would also remind committee members that at our last meeting, there was an amendment that was presented. And now that we are resuming the debate, it was Mr. Miao's amendment. He presented his amendment. So I would ask Mr. Miao to please read and state why this amendment is presented, if you please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And yes, I have moved and presented an amendment in the last meeting. And let me read this out in record again, which is at the end of paragraph B, section 7, removing the following and without redaction and replacing it by using the principle of the Access to Information and Privacy Act. The reasoning is really it's important to follow the principle of the Access to Information and Privacy Act and protect personal information, and the long-standing approach taken by successive governments that has been to reconcile the exercise by the House of Commons of its privilege with other fundamental constitution principles such as the rule of law, parliamentary sovereignty, responsible government, and the separation of power. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Miao. I have Mr. Richards, please.
Thank you. And Chair, it's my hope that we can, this has been ongoing for months. And we're just trying to get a vote on this. We think it's important. We've obviously got veterans here in the room with us today who served in this mission. We have veterans watching from across the country who served in this mission, and they just want to get some answers. I think they feel disrespected by the fact that this has been pushed off and off and off, and by the fact that there's been political interference by the Prime Minister's office in this is something that is a real slap in the face to our veterans that served in this mission, to those that, family members that, lost one of theirs serving in this mission. And it's time we get to a vote on it. So having said that, I do want to make a couple of comments quickly on this amendment that's been moved by the Liberal Party. You all heard the so-called rationale for that. Let me interpret that for anyone who wasn't clear on what it really means. What it really means is the Prime Minister's office has told these Liberals, I don't want to provide these documents because I'm hiding something. And they're standing here today to cover for him. And that is what this means. That the idea that you can black out a bunch of the information that's in these documents, this is just documents that talk about what happened in this period of time. And I'm not going to go on at length about this, but on November 8th of 2021, the decision of the jury that was set up to decide on the design of this monument was communicated to the Minister of Canadian Heritage and to the Minister of Veterans Affairs. And then somewhere in the period of time between November 8th of 2021 and June of last year, so almost a 2-year period, there was some kind of an effort by the Prime Minister's office to change the decision that was made by this process that they set up. And it was political interference, plain and simple. And these documents are just designed to try to get to the bottom of that. And if anyone believes that them wanting to be able to black out and redact some of that information is anything other than trying to make sure that anything that incriminates the Prime Minister in his office is prevented from coming out and being seen by the public, but being seen by veterans who served in this mission, they're mistaken, because that is exactly what this amendment is about. We are firmly opposed to that amendment, but we do believe this motion needs to get passed, and we need to get to the bottom of this for our veterans and for the family members of those who served in this mission.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Kissy?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Richards is quite right that a significant amount of time has been spent on this, and there is other business of the committee. As you indicated in your opening remarks, we have witnesses lined up on Wednesday. I wonder if we could get, and I don't know how long the debate is going to take place today. I wonder if we could get the unanimous consent of the committee to actually go ahead with the agenda as planned on Wednesday and not have those witnesses be required to stand down. So that would be my request, is that there be unanimous consent of the committee to proceed with hearing from witnesses this coming Wednesday.
Should the Liberals decide not to filibuster and we can get to a vote on this, we'd have no problem doing that. But I can't give consent until I know they're going to stop their filibuster.
Okay. Good. But I just want to say that the last meeting, we had witnesses there, but we have committee business. So we postponed those witnesses till this Wednesday. So we already invite them. So they will be here next Wednesday. So it's up to the committee to decide. But I heard that there is some people having some trauma, things like that. So we'd like to be careful on Wednesday on that. So are there
I
any?
would certainly encourage the Liberals to end the filibuster. Let's get to a vote on this. Let's not redact these documents. Let's get to the bottom of this, and then we can move on and we can have our witnesses on Wednesday. It's quite easy.
So I have no other interventions on that amendment, so I'm going to put it to vote. So, Mr. Clerk, please, we have the amendment of Mr. Miao, so I'd like to know what is the result? Yeah, please.
Mr. Casey,
In favor?
Ms. Hefner,
In favor.
Mr. May,
Yes.
Mr. Miao,
Yes.
Mr. Esarai,
In favor?
Mr. Dodo,
Opposed.
Mr. Richards,
Opposed?
Mr. Tolmy,
Opposed.
Ms. Wagenthal,
Opposed.
Monsieur Desilets,
Contre.
Ms. Blaney,
Opposed.
Yeas pour 5, nays contre 6.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. So, Mr. Miao, your amendment is defeated. Okay, next. Mr. Sarai.
Thank you, Chair. I have an amendment to the motion as well. In paragraph B, to remove III, to remove item 3, 4, 5, so triple I, IV, V, and VI, so 3, 4, 5, and 6, and remove the following in part under 7, the Office of the Minister of Canadian Heritage and the Office of the Prime Minister. And my reasoning for that is before we look to request even more documents from the government, let's look at the facts of what came out of the documents we have already received. The documents have showed that the government deviated from an established procurement process against the advice of Canadian Heritage officials. They show the department pushing to listen to the feedback of veterans from every stage.
Me, Mr. Sarai, Mr. Richards.
Sorry, just a point of order. Two things. I'm a little unclear on what the amendment actually is. I know it's an attempt to try to remove some of the documents that would be produced. Obviously, all these documents are critically important, but I don't understand which ones the Liberals are trying to hide the most vociferously here. So maybe Mr. Sarai could indicate what exactly his amendment is. I'm still unclear. And secondly, I wonder if they could indicate how many more amendments they have to try to delay this thing even further.
So, Mr. Sarai, could you please read again, maybe, this amendment?
Amendment is that in paragraph B of Mr. Richards' motion, we remove items 3, 4, 5, and 6, and remove the following in part 5, part 7. Sorry, I'll say that again. In paragraph B, remove items 3, 4, 5, and 6, and remove the following in part 7, quote, the Office of the Minister of Canadian Heritage and the Office of the Prime Minister.
And can you explain what is the rationale around
Yeah,
that?
that's what I was about to do. So I'm just wanting to know if the clerk is clear on what I want to remove. The clerk is clear on the parts that I wish to remove, or, okay, so
No.
under paragraph B, remove items 3, which is triple I, yeah, 4, 5, and 6, and remove the following in part of 7. And the part I'm asking to remove is the Office of the Minister of Canadian Heritage and the Office of the Prime Minister, end quote.
You were still working on your rationale.
Yes, so
You got cut off.
So you could say 7, yes, so
Yeah.
the 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And 7, entirety, yes.
okay, great. Okay, so the rationale, and after that, I have on the list Mr. Richards.
Sure. So, look, they show that the department was pushing to listen to the feedback of veterans from every stage, from a very early stage. The Minister of Veterans Affairs took the decision to listen to the voices of veterans based on the overwhelming response it received in the survey and a strong desire to put feedback of veterans first. These documents show that the PMO and PCO were informed of those decisions, which frankly makes sense given the fact that the department were looking to deviate in a significant way from an established procurement process. The last document request from this committee, included PMO correspondent, which the opposition neglects to mention, came back as a nil response. So this has been asked before. I have a hard time seeing how that would justify such an expansive motion on producing documents. It is possible to disagree with the government's decision on the matter, as some have expressed. However, the government was transparent with Team Doust regarding the decision and how it was made. The government informed them of their options for recourse. At the same time, the government has made it clear that based on the clear feedback it received through the online questionnaire regarding the 5 finalist designs, that veterans and their families had a very clear preference. And it wasn't just veterans, actually. The Stimson design was preferred across all questions with majority support. Team Doust were presented with the options for legal recourse in this matter through the Trade Tribunal, amongst others. They appear to have chosen not to go down those roads, and that is their right. But the fact that government continues to move forward with a project now showed not some as may not come as a surprise, since veterans continue to say that they want this monument completed as soon as possible and don't want more delays. Even if Mr. Richards has spoken to this previously, we should move on to this. The production of documents, Chair, has been demanded by the opposition Conservatives in PCO, in ethics, where it was voted down to produce documents from PCO with a PMO. Similar production of documents was demanded in a multitude of committees: ethics, foreign affairs, public accounts, and citizenship and immigration, all demanding these vast amounts of production of documents, which frustrates the system. Our minister has appeared here. Multiple meetings have been done. The department has agreed to give a production of documents. The process was given. Reasons for the decisions were given. It's quite clear. Yes, there was a jury. It made a recommendation, but a comprehensive survey of veterans was done. It expressed a different perspective, particularly by the veterans and their families. The Minister of Veterans decided to respond to the opinion of veterans. Full stop. That's the end of this. So that's the rationale. I think it's futile to keep going on this. We have a lot of studies, very important studies, that we wish to move on, some of which are from the opposition parties, and everyone, I think, in the interest of veterans should move on this. Therefore, I move this amendment so that we can speed up this this study and move on topics that veterans really affect their lives and their day-to-day transition from CAF to VAC, as well as in their medical needs and other needs that need to be studied, as well as to complete many studies that we have completed, including a women's study, to put that into text and formally submit it into the House. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sarai. And on my list, I have Mr. Richards and Ms. Blaney right after. Mr. Richards.
Thanks, Chair, and I'll keep this brief as well, now that the Liberal members finished reading the talking points he received from the Prime Minister's office about why this Prime Minister, who once was all about openness and transparency, is trying to cover up this political interference. I just want to make sure it's clear what this amendment does. Essentially, what it does is it removes all of the documents which get at the whole heart of the question here, which is, what was the Prime Minister's office interfering in this for? Why did they interfere? Now, despite the claims made by the Liberal member, the documents that we previously received indicate to us that there were meetings that took place in the 2-year period after this decision was communicated to the 2 ministers involved, where the Prime Minister's office and Privy Council office were involved in meetings, and where they seem to be driving a process to make changes to this. Now, nobody knows what the reason for that interference was, and that's what these documents are seeking to produce. So by removing all of the documents that relate to either the Prime Minister's office or the Privy Council office, it removes the ability for this committee to get to the bottom of what actually happened and why there was political interference. So it's quite clear that what this is attempting to do is just cover up for the Prime Minister once again. And I certainly would agree with the Liberal member that there are a lot of very important things that this committee needs to get to in terms of things that relate to changes that need to be made in terms of how veterans are treated and dealt with by their government and by this department. In terms of, we constantly see delays and denials in basic services and supports that veterans need, and we need to get to that as well. But we need to get this passed, and we need to keep all of the documents included in this so that we can actually find out why was the Prime Minister's office interfering in this. If you remove all the documents that relate to the Prime Minister's office, clearly you're making sure that that can't happen. The Liberal Party has been given their marching orders by the Prime Minister's office to help him cover up, and hopefully other members of the committee will see that, and we can vote this down quickly, and we can move on to a vote and get this motion passed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Richards. And now let's go to Ms. Blaney. You have the floor.
Well, thank you, Chair. And I mean, this has been a frustrating process. I know that I brought forward a notice to motion, putting everybody's wishes in it so that we could try to get this done. Heard a lot of backlash, especially from the Conservatives, so I'm letting it go and trying to get this done. I was clear last time that we were here that I was hoping we would get this finished, and it feels like we're just going in circles. And you know what's sad is that I'm listening to the Conservatives blame the Liberals blame the Conservatives. It's just a lot. And I also know, and I want to thank the analyst so much for his tremendous work, that we just finished a monumental study on veterans that are women, and that the report is sitting there. And sadly, the last couple of weeks, I've been getting messages from veterans who are women who are very concerned that this won't get done, and that the piece of documentation that they wanted to finally be represented in Parliament, because it has never been done before, will be there to give a baseline for the women who served our country and who continue to serve our country. So I'm just really sad to see this continue on. And I will say that I am also frustrated because we know, and I keep hearing this, that there was this great veteran survey and the veterans said, but we still have nothing in the process that clearly states it was veterans. There was no way of knowing that. Now, I trust veterans. I believe that if they knew that there was a survey, they would totally participate. But when I hear that it's going to people's VAC account, like I have to tell you, I talk to veterans every day who talk, well, not every day, multiple times a week, who are calling into those systems or using those systems, and they're traumatized, so they don't go on them anymore. So I don't think it is a really strong statement. And the thing that's frustrating is that there's nothing here to quantify. So if we want to make sure that this monument gets done, and it needs to get done, there's a long history there that we need to acknowledge. But we also have to acknowledge that it being done well, and that communications with veterans continues to be a concern. And I find it very interesting to listen to the Conservatives talk about it like they did it well. I remember when they were serving, and there's nothing great to say about the Liberals either. So everybody can shake or nod their heads. But the reality is veterans are struggling across this country in profound ways. And here we are debating this. So I guess I have a couple of questions. The first one is to Mr. Richards. I'm hearing from the Liberals now that many motions like this are being made in multiple committees. So I'm assuming that there's a strategy there that is more political than based on veterans, if I hear that it's happening in other places. I'm wondering with the Liberals if we can at least keep 5 and 6, right? Because we need to figure out what happened. So let's talk about that. I'd like to offer that up. And then, excuse me, I'm still talking. If I could ask the clerk about a timeline. The clerk, because what I'm hearing is if this is happening in other committees, a huge amount of asking for information, does that mean if we pass this, that we'll just be waiting for months and months and months to get that information to our committee to do the work? And that really concerns me. So if we could get some answers, I think that would help me make a decision.
Thank you, Ms. Blaney. But excuse me, Mr. Richard. Answer, but I already have, okay. Yeah, I already have Mr. Desilets who would like to intervene. So, je donne la parole à Monsieur Desilets s'il veut que vous répondiez.
So I'd like to give the floor to Mr. Desilets. If you'd like to answer, please let me know. But Mr. Desilets, you have the floor. Thank you, Chair. Chair, of course, I'm against the proposed amendment from the Liberals because it removes all the meaning from the motion. What we want is to have a trail and aspects that will enable us to find out what happened in this unfortunate situation concerning the monument, that the PMO refused to allow the firm and the Dow team, once again, who were the winning team, chosen by the jury, a jury, once again, that is formed of professional and competent people. And it's not the Prime Minister's office that can improvise as a jury or expert in art. So that being said, I fully object to the removal of those points, and I look forward to getting through this. The Conservative motion was tabled on December 20th. I understand that it's part of the game, but the Liberals act like this, but the Conservatives are acting like that. I've rarely seen the Bloc members act like this, though, strangely. I won't be long, but there are two ways in which the Liberals are taking veterans hostage. First of all, once again, by giving them the burden of this change of the winning firm. So the Liberals are using the fact that there is said to have been a survey, which has been said over and over, and they're all smart enough to know that the survey in question has absolutely no credibility. So veterans are being taken hostage in this way, and somewhere along the line, they're being blamed for wanting that monument and that we need to go in that direction, which is undemocratic. Because, once again, there were criteria that the government itself brought in and did not respect. That's the first way. The second way, which is actually quite comical, that you say that you look forward to moving on to something else so that we can hear from the veterans, but you're taking the veterans hostage by doing this filibustering, this motion being carried, and move on to something else and bring in the veterans to hear from them. So if you want to play that game, then we will play it somewhere along the line. We'll be here to listen, but that doesn't involve listening to veterans. They ought to be here at the next meeting, and this motion ought to have been carried quite some time ago. Thank you for listening, Chair. Mr. Desilets, thank you for your comments, and we will now hear Mr. Richards.
Ms. Blaney had asked a question that indicated it was to me specifically, one of her questions, and it was related to motions in other committees or something. And I'll just say I'm not aware of what these motions are. I don't know what's happening in these other committees that she's referring to. But what I can tell her is that this motion was something I brought forward about 4 months ago to begin with, simply to try to get to the bottom of this, to find out for veterans what exactly happened with this interference. And it is purely 100% motivated by making sure that we get to the bottom of this on behalf of veterans and their families and nothing more. And there's no political nature to this. This is about veterans.
George and Ms. Blaney, I spoke to the clerk, but he said that for your question, he's not able to answer that because it's the offices that they have to work on that. So we can give you a timeline how long it's going to take to have those documents. Other interventions on, oh, Mr. Sarai. Thank you.
Yes, I think it would be helpful if the clerk could find out in regards to Ms. Blaney's question, what the typical timelines have been on these production of documents. Has it been weeks, months, et cetera? So that would help, I think, Ms. Blaney. I think when it comes to us, I thank her for her intervention in respects to number 5 and 6. But, you know, if it's important to her, I think we can add, that would not be, the number 5 and 6, to add them back in would not be acceptable by us. But we could add any communication between the Office of the Minister of Veterans Affairs and the Office of Canadian Heritage. I think that's probably one of the only ones that has not been done out of the two ministers before, and that's something that might help Ms. Blaney understand or see the process by which this has been. We're, I think, pretty comfortable with that, so I wanted to add that if that's something amicable to her, but thank you.
Yes, thank you. And just to remind the committee that on the motion, we stipulate that within 21 days, donc dans les 21 jours suivant l'adoption de la motion.
So within 21 days of the motion being carried, they have to submit the documents.
Interventions sur l'amendement.
Any other comments on the amendment presented by Mr. Randip Sarai? No? Very well then. We will move on to the vote on the amendment from Mr. Randip Sarai.
In favor?
Ms. Hefner. Mr. May.
Yes.
Mr. Mignard.
In favor?
Mr. Sarai.
In favor?
Mr. Doddle.
Opposed.
Mr. Richards.
Opposed?
Mr. Tolmy.
Opposed.
Ms. Wagenthal.
Opposed.
Monsieur Desilets.
Contre.
Ms. Blaney.
Opposed.
Yes pour 5, 5. Nays contre 6, 6.
Alors, Monsieur Randip Sarai.
So, Mr. Randip Sarai, the amendment that you moved has been defeated. There we are. Mr. Casey.
I wish to propose another amendment to add after paragraph B. Mr. Chair, I think you recognized me when Conservative members had the floor. We afforded them the courtesy of silence while they had the floor, and I'd appreciate if I had the same. So the amendment that I'd like to propose is to add after paragraph B7 the following: that the committee invite the Honorable Aaron O'Toole, former Minister of Veterans Affairs, to respond to questions about the selection of the Richmond landing site in 2014 for the National Monument to Canada's mission in Afghanistan, and specifically why veterans were not properly consulted. Mr. Chair, the committee, I understand in my absence, has adopted one amendment at least to Mr. Richards' motion, and that is to expand the time period for the production of documents back to 2014, which I think was an excellent thing to do if we are to, as Mr. Richards says, get to the bottom of this. And given that we're reaching back to 2014, the person calling the shots at that time was the Minister of Veterans Affairs. So in the interest of transparency, in the interest of being comprehensive, I do believe that Mr. O'Toole would have relevant testimony to bring to the issue, and that he be included in the witness list. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Casey. So we have an amendment on the table.
Right back, Chair.
Yeah. Mr. Casey, could you please read it again for us? Thank you.
That we add after paragraph B7 the following. C, that the committee invite the Honorable Aaron O'Toole, former Minister of Veterans Affairs, to respond to questions about the selection of the Richmond landing site in 2014 for the National Monument to Canada's mission in Afghanistan, and specifically why veterans were not properly consulted.
Thank you, Mr. Casey. Debate, interventions. Mr. Sarai, please.
I just want to say, I think what Mr. Casey is proposing in the amendment is very important. This process started long before this government came in, and I think it's very important to find out the process and lack of it that was done before. And that probably will give a perspective on why a minister had to make the decision that the minister did later on. So I think it's very imperative that we listened and hear Mr. O'Toole, who was administered with this file, had debated this or talked about this, how they came up with that decision, why that decision was the way it was, what the veterans' opinion of that decision was, and why subsequently that location had to be changed, that whole decision had to be changed. And it's a real unfortunate part is that the previous government neglected to do a monument for these veterans, and the location was not the one that they wanted as well. And now we've been trying to move ahead, and we've been trying to listen to veterans, albeit I can agree to Ms. Blaney that maybe the process was not perfect, the survey was not absolutely perfect, but the data that's been given by Veterans Affairs, their bureaucrats, their civil servants, has been pretty comprehensive in showing that overwhelming majority of those respondents were veterans or veterans of their members of veterans' families. I think we trust Canadians when they do a survey that they give fairly accurate information. We're a country that usually honors people's opinions, and when they say who they are, we respect it unless challenged otherwise. And I think out of everything we've heard here today, nobody has challenged the validity of saying that, oh, I know 12 people or 5 people or X amount of people that misstated they were veterans. I think when they said they're veterans, and we have to honor that and respect that. I would highly doubt any Canadian would mischaracterize a survey and say they're veterans. So at the same time, I think it's very important to see the process or lack of it in the previous government, and that's why we ask that Mr. O'Toole come before this committee and also answer questions in that regards.
Thank you, Mr. Sarai. And on my list, I have Mr. Richards and Mrs. Hefner. Mr. Richards.
Well, I would just say this, Chair. The period of time that we're concerned with here as a committee is obviously from November 8th of 2021 through to the time the decision was changed, where there was interference by the Prime Minister's office. Now, having said that, obviously Mr. O'Toole would, I would assume, have nothing in terms of information that could contribute to this for that period of time. Having said that, unlike when we tried to invite the previous Minister of Veterans Affairs and the previous Minister of Canadian Heritage, who actually had responsibility for these files during that period of time, and they refused to come to this committee, Conservatives are transparent. So I have no issue at all with Mr. O'Toole would like to come and try to contribute, then let's have him come. But it would sure be wonderful if the ministers who were actually responsible during this period of time also had the same accountability and showed up as well.
Thank you, Mr. Richards. And now let's go to Mrs. Hefner.
Merci. Je voulais souligner.
Thank you. I wanted to point out that the commemorative monument of Canada's mission to Afghanistan will recognize the commitment and sacrifice of Canadian men and women who served in Afghanistan, as well as the support given by their families, their peers, and their communities in the country. I find it very odd that I've heard more said about the artists than about the veterans when it was a question of this issue. After all, this is a monument to honor veterans. But I think that there is a reason behind that that explains why we are hearing opposition members talking about the artistic community, and it's a simple reason. The majority of veterans are satisfied with the government's choice. And we know that veterans were not pleased when the Conservative government decided to place the monument below a bridge, and they expressed their discontent with that decision. It was not surprising because the veterans were not even consulted for the choice of the location of the monument. For this reason, when we came to power in 2015, we reversed that decision and we consulted veterans. Our government will always listen and support veterans. And as the Minister of Veterans Affairs said several times, Canadian veterans they received comments from more than 12,000 Canadians concerning that monument. Veterans, their families, and others who participated in that mission are primarily those who commented on these concepts. The Stimson team's concept most faithfully respects the comments from veterans, their families, and other participants in that mission. When we refer to honoring the sacrifice of our veterans, we must listen to them. Thank you. Thank you very much for your comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And, we appreciate and respect the work of the jury member who evaluated the final design concepts. However, it is clear that the Team Stimson design was the one that veterans of the missions and their families felt best represented the bravery, sacrifices, and loss of those who serve in Afghanistan. And the result of the consultation, which are also public, are clear, and it's important that we listen to our veterans. All the documents we've received show that the reason why the government choose to go with the Team Stimson design, and the reason is clear, and in fact, the minister told us in previous meeting and a few times that was at the committee to talk about it for almost an hour about that. And I'll repeat again for the reason. Veterans Affairs Canada heard from more than 12,000 Canadians about the monument designs, and the majority of those who responded were veterans, their families, and others who serve on the missions. And Team Stimson's design best reflect their input, and we choose to honor that choice. I think when it comes to honoring and sacrifice of our veterans, we must listen to them. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miao. And we still have Ms. Hepner. Yes.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Once again, it's simply to underline that I'm not surprised that the Conservative Party is asking us to ignore the voices of veterans on this issue, because this is precisely what they did when they were in power. In 2014, they announced the location of the monument through a press release. Do I have the floor? Yes.
Okay, Ms. Hepner, you have the floor. Please continue. Right. Sorry,
En
please.
2014,
In 2014, they announced the location of that monument by means of a press release, without even taking time to consult veterans. Veterans were not happy with that, and it's hardly surprising that the Conservatives selected a site which is often blocked by snow in winter, and where sometimes there is flooding in springtime. We canceled that decision and listened to veterans, and we selected an appropriate site. We will continue to listen to veterans. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Hepner.
Mr. Kessie and Mr. Sarai.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. We've heard today that this is all about veterans. This is what I would call Trudeau derangement syndrome, where individuals that have another agenda, an agenda that isn't aligned with veterans, one that is purely political, seek to smear the Prime Minister without foundation, without reason. And I think that that's what we're dealing with. Monsieur le Président, j'ai une référence.
Mr. Chair, I have a reference in the testimony of the meeting of October 19th in support of the position which I just stated. And this was an exchange between Mr. Desilets and the Minister of Veterans Affairs. During that discussion, Mr. Desilets accused the minister of sidestepping the questions that he asked, and he said, I will return to the question of veterans. As you know, for 4 years, I've been working very hard for veterans. Yet, in this file, there is no question of veterans. There is no question of veterans. That was very clear, and that explains why we are here. No question of veterans. It's not a question of veterans, it's a question of politics. That is why we see a lack of acceptance. That's why we wanted to vote against the amendment on the documents that involve the discussions between the Prime Minister's office and the Privy Council. So this is the true rationale for why we are here. I find this aberrant, indeed, that opposition members refused to produce the documents that would have enabled us to see correspondence concerning the jury, and that now they want to get something specific regarding the jury. I want to give them the benefit of the doubt, but it seems to me that the opposition colleagues only want to get those documents that they think will align with the narrative that they're attempting to construct. They do not want to hear anything about veterans, nor even the opinions in favor of the final choice, i.e., the concept of the Stimson team. Nevertheless, it is a monument that is there to honor veterans, a commemorative monument, a national monument to Canada's mission in Afghanistan that will recognize the commitment and sacrifice of Canadian men and women who served in Afghanistan, as well as the support that was provided by Canadians to them in the country. The monument will testify also to the profound gratitude of Canada toward the sacrifice given by persons who served in Afghanistan, including those who lost their lives or were injured either physically or psychologically. The monument will be used as a public space to remind us forever of the altruistic devotion of Canadians to their country, and will give future generations an opportunity to learn more about this particular monument to the history of our country. We know that the jury's decision was not unanimous, in contrast to what my colleague asserted in the House. The jury did a remarkable job in choosing the 5 finalist concepts. We all agreed with that. As head of the project, the role of Veterans Affairs Canada is to listen to veterans, It's the contrary that was said by Mr. Desilets. It really is a question of veterans, and we must listen to them. Veterans Affairs Canada received comments from more than 12,000 Canadians regarding the concept for this monument. The veterans, their families, and others who participated in that mission are, for the most part, those who commented on those concepts. The concept of the Simpson team more accurately respects the comments of veterans, their families, and other participants in that mission during our consultation of public opinion. It is really essential to listen to veterans and honor their choice.
Mr. Chair, I'll close with this. What we have here is a political smear campaign that has far exceeded the partisan attacks and the partisan maneuvers we have seen in this place in other committees. In order to get to other committee business, in order to be able to do the things that are important to people, in order to be able to do the things that are for veterans, for example, in other committees, we have seen similar motions seeking the production of documents from the Prime Minister's office and the Privy Council office. But the following committees have actually adopted motions without the inclusion of PMO and PCO. The Ethics Committee had several motions about Chinese interference that included the PMO, where the committee agreed to remove the PMO. The Foreign Affairs Committee, the Public Accounts Committee, the Citizenship and Immigration Committee, and the Health Committee. There is a way to resolution of this impasse, and I would encourage everyone in the interest of veterans, which seems to be a bit of a novel concept, to try to put some water in their wine and to try to get through this impasse in a reasonable fashion. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Kissy. And on my list, I have Mr. Sarai and Mr. Desilets. Mr. Sarai, please.
Thank you, Chair. And I thank my colleague, Mr. Casey, on shedding light on this. Look, when you want a process, when we do a process and we don't consult veterans, we don't consult the stakeholders in it, the product you get is might be artistically great, but would not be something that people want. The previous government and the previous Minister for Veterans decided to put a monument under a bridge, tuck it away where only bicyclists could possibly drive by and wave to it, where the opposite was done. I guess when the victims of communists got a huge, glorious spot along Wellington Street for the whole world to see, while those who served and died for Afghanistan were about to get a spot between the Portage Bridge for, again, cyclists to wave on. Veterans were in uproar. They said they don't get it. They don't get it at all. This was done, and if you look at who it was conversed with, who knew, they said literally virtually no one. I think they checked with several veterans groups. None said they were consulted about the spot as an appropriate location to honor the 158 Canadian Forces members killed and the 40,000 who served during that 12-year mission. Even our Legion, the Royal Canadian Legion, said it didn't know a thing about it, except that Dow's Lake was once a candidate Bruce Monroe, I think the president of the Year-Old Veterans Association of Canada, said the group was not contacted. He's not only sold on the site, but appears that he was couldn't even find it and thought it was tucked away. Accessibility is everything too. I think veterans, as they had said at the time, if it's too far off the beaten track, pretty soon you can see the dandelions creeping in and skateboarders doing tricks on it. And jogger may run by it, but won't look back at it twice. It might be like a war itself, another forgotten war. These were the comments that the Veterans Affairs Office and the public heard after the previous decision was made. The main problem they had, that they were not consulted. They were not consulted on the final product, on the commemoration, the sacrifices, the location. And that's why in May of 2021, the Government of Canada posted a survey. They asked veterans, families of those who participated in the mission, Canadian Armed Forces members, other stakeholders, and the public, Canadian public, to share their thoughts on the design concepts proposed by the following 5 finalists. There was the Team HAPA Collaborative. There was the Team Lashley McDonald concept. There was the concept from Team PFS Studio. There was the Team Stimson. And the results after had over 12,000, I think 12,048 valid surveys were analyzed. There was 10,829 in English, 1,219 in French. In cases where multiple surveys were submitted from the same IP address, they were deemed to be overly similar or overly similar. All but one survey was only removed, so we can say that it was a fairly free vote and no manipulation occurred in that regards. The questions were pretty thorough. The first question was on monument theme. Following question was asked. This means that each respondent could select more than one answer. As a result, percentages may have added up to more than 100%, but you get to see how people felt about each. The monument had several related themes. Which designs you think most effectively express those themes? You were able to select the themes that appropriated to you. The themes were to express Canada's deep gratitude for the sacrifices made by Canadians who served in Afghanistan, including those Canadian Armed Forces members and civilians who lost their lives or were injured. There was 11,807 respondents. Team Doust got 26.5% of thought that people the surveyed thought that there was reflected it well. Team HAPA Collaborative got 13%. Team McDonald, Lashley McDonald, got 20.5%. Team PFS Studios got 16.8%. And Team Stimson got 63.9%, 64%, more than double of any other of the closest, which Team Douse was probably the closest at 26.5. So 2.5 times that response. The next question that was asked with respects to team, which was to recognize the strong support offered by families, friends, and communities at home and during the mission. Again, the 11,299 people responded. 27% thought Team Doust was had the best in that regards. 15.5% thought Team HAPA, and 17% McDonald, and 14% thought Team's PFS Studio. But Team Stimson got 52%. Again, double the amount of the nearest, the closest to reflect on that. When we go to acknowledge the efforts of Canadians in standing together with Afghan people to help rebuild their country and encourage understanding of the significance and scope of the Canadian mission. Again, 11,500 people. These are pretty comprehensive surveys, I might add, with a very strong response. 31% thought Team Doust, 13 on HAPA Collaborative, and Team Stimson was 56%. Again, doubling the, virtually doubling the second highest amount. The second most thing, I guess, which people, besides commemoration, is how many people will see it, what's the visitor experience. So there are questions asked with respects to do you think the design effectively performs the following for a visitor experience of functions? Again, over 11,500 responded. Team Douse got a good response of 37%. Others were 19.5, 22, but Team Stimson got 54% of the response in favor that it gave the best visitor experience when one came to see it. The other question was encouraging visitors to learn more about the mission. This is something that museums and commemoration is an important thing to do, is how do you raise the inquisitiveness of a visitor to learn about what has happened and what it's commemorating. Again, out of the 11,334, Team Douse got 22.8. I won't go into the other ones. They're ranging between 12 and 18%. But Team Stimson was 65%. The 65% thought it gave more of a visitor experience. And then the setting, providing for gatherings and ceremonies, because that's a very important part. Team Douse got a good response of 40%. Others were 12, 27, 20, and 13%. But again, Team Stimson stood out with 52%, 51.9%. These effectively show that the effect of the design of a Team Stimson on the effect of visitors, on effect of location, on effect of commemoration, had an overwhelming impact. It wasn't even close when we look at others. The other questions that were just impressions of the proposed monument designed, was one more cold, was one more peaceful, was one more solemn. I think, again, Team Stimson's designs showed a very high result in those regards. And when we looked at the French results, and particularly a high majority, I assume, would have come from Quebec to reflect those. The results were not any different from those that came from Anglophone Canadians and other parts of Canada. So I think that was clearly reflective, that there were neutral designs, there were great designs, and however certain attested to people's feelings and affections and responses more so when that was always this Team Stimson design. Even to find out how many of these were from National Capital Region, because sometimes people from my neck of the woods will always say it's a little biased. I think only 2,700 responses came from this region, and that's obviously still with a high veteran population, as well as Ontario and Quebec population that would have been, and a strong government, bureaucratic, and military presence, and that was about 25%. British Columbia received 1,000 responses, 1,084. That's 13.64% of the thing. I think that is quite reflective of our population in respect to the rest of Canada. So it seemed like the diversity and the demographics of Canada were respected well. Alberta got 1,200, 15%. In fact, I would say a little bit overly representative. But when you go across all the spectrums, including Atlantic Canada, I think it was fairly across the perspective. So all categories, all provinces, all jurisdictions, and all demographics were respected. And lastly, I would just like to say that when it came to the category of, whether there's a lot of debate and questions that this committee has looked at as whether how many were veterans and whatnot. I think when people were asked who you are, did you participate in Canada's government mission in Afghanistan? Are you either as a Canadian Armed Forces member, police officer, or public servant, or civilian? And 28%, 3,000 of the respondents had stated they were. Whether you are a family member or individual participating in Canada's whole of government mission, that included, again, CAF members, police officers, public servants, or civilians, there was another 12.5%, 1,300 members. The third highest category was a veteran of Canada's military. Again, people who have served. 2,800, 26% stated they were. And if there were current members of Canadian Armed Forces, 2,500 or 23% of the Canadian of those surveyed were Canadian Armed Forces members. And if there were current or former Canadian police officers that we respect as veterans, 300. And then the general public, which is about a third, were about 3,876. So I think this gives you a perspective that this was not a small consultation. It was not a small poll. This was a very comprehensive study, and I think we should move on with the wishes of the veterans and get to the real work, which is building this monument.
Thank you, Mr. Sarai, and I remind the committee that we are still discussing the amendment of Mr. Kissy. And on my list, I have Mr. Desilets, Mr. Ruff, and Ms. Epler. And I also want to welcome Ms. MP Alex Ruff at the committee. And we also have someone, Jack Maziad, who are there to help our clerk. So welcome to both of you. And Mr. Desilets, à vous la parole.
Merci, Monsieur
The floor is yours. Thank you, Chair. I'll try to be brief in order not to play the game of the Liberals and enable them to get to the end of the committee meeting without actually either carrying or defeating the motion. But I'm very empathetic toward your situation because you've done a huge job of filibustering. It's not all that easy because I'm sure that it's not part of your values. You're not really like that. I'm convinced of that. In fact, you had a marvelous caucus where you presented the situation of the monument, and a large number of Liberal members were not in favor of the government's position. A large number were uncomfortable with the government situation, or the choice that the government made, rather. And that's the first thing. Secondly, you talk about veterans. We have some veterans here. Take time to go and talk to them about that after the meeting, if they're in favor or not of the way the government proceeded to choose who would build this monument. Take time to go see them later. You're blaming them for everything. And yes, Mr. Casey, I said there's no question of, or it's not a question of veterans. It's not a veterans issue. You repeated that 4 or 5 times. Thank you for that. But the only problem is that you didn't put that in context. You're still using veterans somewhere along the line. It doesn't involve the veterans. If you wanted to involve them, well, then, my gosh, you should have put that in your selection criteria. That was not done, except for the survey, which is low-level survey, denigration. So stop using them. So look at your colleagues around you and how little pride a lot of them have regarding the way the government makes decisions. It's really aberrant. And you talked about a smear campaign. I would say all we want, and even the Conservatives, I barely agree with them, but all we want to do is get transparency. So you took 2 hours once again. You spent 2 hours avoiding really looking at reality. Let's just move forward and carry this motion. Mr. Casey, it is not a decision that the jury had to take unanimously. I agree with that, and I return to that position, as you're well aware, but you can reuse it as many times as you want. But the jury had to decide as a majority. The jury chose, and the Dow team was chosen as a majority. That's all. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Desilets.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just finding this very frustrating. As one of the veterans in this room that spent over a year of my life in Afghanistan, left 6 of my soldiers there, that this monument is going to commemorate. 158 Canadian Armed Forces members did not come home. I can't speak for all Afghanistan veterans. I do know what they want. They want a monument. They want transparency. They want a decision and this to get passed so that we can move on. Because right now they don't have a place to go commemorate at the national level. The Liberals have talked about consultation. Ms. Blaney brought up the challenges with the consultation and the data and my VAC. I just spent 20 minutes trying to log in to my VAC account. I can't get in, right? And I'm a fairly educated person with a background under the IT, and I can't even log in to my VAC account right now without making a phone call and talking to somebody on the other end, which who knows how long that wait's going to be. I'll tell you what veterans don't want. They don't want political interference in anything. They will serve, when they were in uniform, they serve whatever government's in power. I served proudly the Liberal government that was in power when I first joined the forces in 1993. I served the Conservative government when they were in power for over a decade, and I served under this current Liberal government. No issues there. Veterans will serve whatever government's in power. That's their job. But they don't want obstruction. They don't want political interference. They want transparency. And one thing that they absolutely detest is wasting time. I suggest you read the body language of the veterans that are in the room that are finding this very frustrating, in particular, because this is an amendment that's been moved that we're debating now that the Conservatives already indicated they're going to vote for. So why are we talking about it? It's going to pass. So let's just get to the vote. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. And now I have Ms. Hefner. It's your time.
Sorry. Mr. Ruff, thank you for your service and thank you for your words today. And I think it is important that we talk about how this decision was made by veterans. More than 10,000 people responded to that survey. And I'm reading from a story from CTV last year when that decision was made. They overwhelmingly preferred a design put forward by Team Simpson. And I think it's, if you look at the designs, you can see it's a circular space inspired by an Indigenous medicine wheel sectioned into 4 parts with an inner sanctuary featuring 4 bronze flak jackets hanging from crosses. Artist Adrian Stimson is a member of the Siksika First Nation in Alberta. He's perhaps uniquely qualified to create this monument. He's a former member of the Armed Forces. He joined the Canadian Forces Artist Program as a civilian in 2010 and spent time in Afghanistan, observing how the troops lived and interacted with their surroundings. He said, while I was there, I became interested in the physical materiality of the bases, the industrial nature of the embedding troops into the theater of war. Mimicking this, the monument is a place to be discovered and to be revealed. The monument enlivens as you approach on a meandering pathway, revealing itself slowly with purpose. 3 quadrants of the monument include the names of 158 Canadian military members who were killed in the conflict. And the 4th is meant to honor Canada's relationship with the Afghan people. And so I think it's important that we recognize that it wasn't political interference, it was the government listening to veterans themselves. And I think we should keep that in mind. The veterans do want us to move on to other issues. They want us to build this monument and move on to talking about many of the other issues that Mr. Ruff brought up that are important as well that we get to. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. And now I turn the mic to Miss Blenny. So, Miss Blenny, the floor is yours. Please.
I apologize, Chair. I was just
No
having
problem.
a chit chat with one of my colleagues. So I'm just really struggling with this because there is a lot we need to get done in this committee. So I think that here we are having this repeat. And so I guess my curiosity here is, you know, one of the things that I've talked a lot about is having VAC have a more veteran-centric communication strategy. And I would also say a greater level of trauma-informed training. Because what we hear again and again from veterans, of course, sadly, is that they're often re-traumatized. It's called sanctuary trauma. And so here we are. I mean, I'm just getting frustrated. I would like to see Wednesday to happen. We've already turned all of those people away. You know, they came, and one of them is a veteran who has shared with me her frustration about having that happen. So I think we just need to do Wednesday, and I just want to be clear about that because I just feel that I don't want to be talking to the same veteran again about why she was turned away and from having her voice heard. So I guess I want to get answers too. But what I can't handle here is that there continues to be this discussion, oddly enough, that veterans were consulted, and I don't believe that's the case. I believe I asked questions when the ministers were here, and I don't believe it. So I hear that the Liberals believe it, and I just want to get this done. Like, I've talked to Afghan veterans who just want a place to be remembered, and there was a fear that their service would not be recognized. And we've not only lost them in Afghanistan, we lost them in our own country where they took their own life. So I don't care really which monument is put up. Personally, I don't care. It's not my job to make that decision. That is really up to veterans, and I agree with that. But we need a better process. So I hope we can get this done. I hope we can get it done quickly, and I hope we can focus on serving veterans the way that we have been put in this position to serve them, is to be here and to do our work. You know, I'm just skimming through again the study on the women veterans. This is amazing what's in here, and there's so much more that we need to do. Like, I really want to get on the study around the Persian Gulf veterans. I know that the Persian Gulf veterans are going through some significant challenges right now, and we need to acknowledge them and give them the support through this committee with the work that we do. I don't want to turn away veterans who are trying to come. So I hope that we can just vote on this. Can I call the vote so that we can at least get this part done? And then if they're going to continue to filibuster, I think collectively we need to start thinking about how we can get information that may not be able to come through the committee.
Thank you, Ms. Blady, but I have Mr. May who'd like to intervene, but thank you for raising this issue for this Wednesday, because we are in a position, like you said, that we already invite those witnesses. So at the end of this meeting, I'd like to know clearly what the committee wants to do. If not, I'm going to instruct the clerk to cancel those witnesses, because I don't want them to come back again and not be able to talk. So I'll come back to you, and now I'd like to hear from, on the Zoom, Mr. May. Point of order? Yeah, please, Mr. Richards.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I mean, I think your question is an important one, but I think the more important question before we get to that question is, the Liberals plan to filibuster through the rest of this meeting, or will they let this come to a vote today? Because I think it's important that we have that happen. I think everybody else on this committee has expressed they want to see that happen, Chair. So can the Liberals just give us an indication? Are they going to allow a vote, Chair, or are they not?
I heard you. So, Mr. Brian May, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As this is the first time I'm speaking today, I just want to confirm that the folks in the booth can hear me okay, and that I'm coming through effectively. I apologize for my absence today. A bit under the weather, but I did want to jump in. I agree with Rachel. MP Blaney, excuse me, that we need to get to the women's study. We need to get to the issues that are pressing, that are in front of this committee, and have now been for quite some time. I will remind this committee that I warned this committee many months ago that this discussion, this motion that was originally brought forward by Luc, MP Desilets, was going to result in mission creep. That's exactly what's happened. We're seeing a attempt by the opposition, specifically the Conservatives now, to make this into something that it is not. And I also wanted to thank MP Ruff for his service, and agree with him that, quite frankly, this is exactly what frustrates veterans. The veterans that I've spoken to at length don't want us to be sniping back and forth on attempts to embarrass the government. They want us to deal with the issues of the day. They want us to deal in very speedy fashion the motions that are in front of us. And I think it's important to remind the committee and remind those that are watching what in fact has been agreed upon by this committee to study and get to. Not just the women's study, which so far I've gotten through a first pass of it. It is excellent. Thank you to the analysts for the work that you've done on this. I look forward to getting back to that and getting that tabled in the House of Commons as quickly as possible. But not just that study. We have a motion that was tabled by my colleague MP Sarai. Basically the effects of exposure to burn pits on Canadian veterans, and I'll read it for those because it's been a while since we've discussed them, just to remind everybody what that is. Pursuant to the Standing Order 1082, the committee undertake a study on the effects of exposure to burn pits on Canadian veterans, including but not limited to during the mission in Afghanistan, as well as the potential long-term effects on the health and well-being of veterans, that the committee hold a minimum of 4 meetings to hear from witnesses, that the committee report its findings and recommendations.
Point of order, Chair.
And that pursuant to the Standing Order...
Excuse me, Mr. Excuse me, I have a point of order. So, yeah. Mr. Ruff, please.
Thanks, Chair. I'm just trying to understand the relevance. We're talking about the amendment of calling the Honourable Aaron O'Toole to be part of this motion. The member is Mr. May, speaking about something, a different study that's been proposed. So can we have a ruling on relevance there, Chair?
Thank you. So, Mr. May, so please, we have an amendment on the floor. So if you can talk around this amendment tabled by Mr. Kidd, please.
And I think it is relevant, Mr. Chair, and I apologize to the members who don't necessarily want me to remind folks what in fact we should be working on and what we should be talking about. And I recognize that we have a motion on the floor, an amendment on the floor that we need to discuss. But as this is my time, I think it's important, and I'd like to get back to finishing my discussion on this. I think it's important to remind veterans and remind this committee what it is that we should be working on in terms of the time that we have, and the time that we have is limited. We're here twice a week during the sitting weeks. We have a very short calendar to get some of this stuff done, and another such study that we should be in the middle of right now is the study that Wilson MP Wilson Meow tabled, and I'll remind this committee of that study as well. That pursuant to Standing Order 1082, that the committee undertake a comprehensive study reviewing a definition of wartime service, and special duty service, and B, the difference, the process of determining and criteria for veterans' benefits in respect of wartime service and the special duty service. That the committee hold a minimum of 4 meetings on this study, and that committee report its comprehensive findings and recommendations to the House of the Department of National Defense and the Department of Veterans Affairs. And I could tell you, I had a conversation, Mr. Chair, about that study just this past week with some local veterans in my riding who have been asking for recognition of special service for an incredibly long time. These are the ways that we can move forward. These are just 2 of the studies. I haven't even discussed the motion that I tabled not that long ago, I think it was back in November, that we study the experience of Indigenous veterans and Black veterans. These are compelling studies that should draw our attention. And instead The Conservatives want to play games. They want to stymie not just this committee, but they want to stymie the work that's being done at PMO. They want to call for basically a deep sea fishing exercise to try to waste the time of this committee and waste the time of PMO. Mr. Chair, I think it is incredibly important that we consider adjourning this debate. I will let others make that decision, but I with the half an hour that we have left here, I think we should be getting to the business of what this committee will be doing when we come back. We haven't even discussed that. What is next on the docket? We know that we hopefully will have witnesses on Wednesday.
Mr. May, just 1 minute, please. I have a point of order. So, Mr. Richards.
I know that the Liberal member talks about wanting to try to end the debate. There is an easy way for us to get to some of the other topics, which is we could simply have a vote on this motion, which everybody else other than the
Chair, it's not a point of order. A point of order is not a way to interrupt somebody's intervention.
Please don't interrupt the one who has the mic. Sorry, it's not a point of order. So, Mr. May, please go on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was coming to an end. I did want to conclude by simply saying that the fear that I had when we started this process many months ago has in fact materialized, that this committee has become stymied on this issue. I would very much like to see us get to the motions that are in front of this committee and do the work that veterans want us to do. The veterans that I speak to want the monument built, period. They want it built. They want to get to that point where they can stand in front of that monument and honor the fallen soldiers that they served beside. We also have a number, as I've said, I've only read two of them. There's, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Chair, you can check with the analyst. I believe there are 6 motions that are in front of us, including motions that the Conservatives have tabled themselves and apparently have just decided it's not important anymore, as important as this. So I just want to identify these motions that are in front of us. And I want to identify the fact that the opposition has decided that what we're debating today is more important to them. And I can tell you that the veterans that I've spoken to, that is not the case. This debate, this last hour and a half, has not been important to veterans. The motions that we have all agreed upon are. And the sooner we can get back to those motions, the sooner we can move forward with recommendations to the government and actually effect change that will support veterans in this country. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. May. And on the list, I have Mr. Richards and Mr. Kissing. Mr. Richards.
Thanks, Chair. And I mean, I want us to get this dealt with. I know that all the other members, other than the Liberal members, want us to get this dealt with. I've asked for some indication whether they would allow this to get to a vote today. I mean, I think it's clear to everybody who's watching this what's going on here. There's attempts to try to delay and deny, just like veterans see every day with their ability to get benefits. And so let's get to a vote on this. So Chair, I'll just ask for unanimous consent that we carry the meeting through until at least until 2 p.m. Or until we have a vote on this motion.
Just a second. Wow. Okay. First of all, just want to make sure that we have technical staff to be able to go to 2 o'clock. So yes, so we're gonna go to a vote on that. So I'd like to know if I have unanimous consent to go to 2 o'clock. No, we don't have unanimous consent. So are you
Chair,
finished
can
with
the-
your?
Yeah, I'm just wondering maybe then if the Liberals could give us some indication as to why they're not willing to go till 2 PM. Is it just simply that they want to continue this cover-up? They don't want to have a vote on this? Because I mean, we just heard from a Liberal member that they want to get to dealing with other matters that the committee wants to deal with. And I certainly want to see that happen as well. I think all of us want to see that happen. I know the veterans in the room and those watching online all want to see that as well. And by going till 2 PM, we can get this motion dealt with and we can deal with those things, which is what we should all want to do. So I wondered if the Liberals could give us an indication as to why they're refusing to give veterans their due.
Thank you, Mr. Richards. And like I said, on my list, I have Mr. Sean Kessé.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe in Mr. May's presentation, he suggested an adjournment of debate. I'm not sure if that was a motion to adjourn debate or whether he was putting it out there for discussion. Because if it is a motion to adjourn debate, we have to proceed directly
I
to a
know, but
vote.
I didn't hear that clearly from Mr. May to adjourn debate on that motion, on that amendment or motion.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to come back to a couple of things that that have been mentioned in the course of the debate. Mr. Ruff, first of all, allow me to add my thanks to you for your service. One of the things Mr. Ruff said is that he knows what veterans want, and so do we. It was reflected in the survey, and it has guided the decisions that have been made in connection with this matter, and it has been referenced on numerous occasions by the minister that that was the paramount consideration, because this is or should be about veterans. Ms. Blaney talked about Veterans Affairs having a more veteran-centric communications strategy. I would suggest that that is being respected in the manner in which the survey was utilized in the decision-making process. I would also like to say that I agree entirely with her when she indicated in her intervention that she'd like to get on with witnesses on Wednesday. That's the reason why I sought unanimous consent at the outset of the meeting, so we're certainly on the same page in that regard. Mr. Chair, the minister has come before this committee 3 times since October, and every time when regardless of the topic that she was here to discuss, and it wasn't exclusively the Afghanistan monument. However, the questions, in spite of what the topic was that she was to appear on, including estimates, the conversation quickly turned to the Afghanistan monument. And on every occasion, on the 3 occasions that she came before this committee, she clearly indicated that Veterans Affairs chose to listen to veterans, and that it was Veterans Affairs Canada. It was Veterans Affairs Canada that made the decision. So the conspiracy theories about alleged political interference by the Prime Minister, there is absolutely nothing to substantiate that. There's nothing to justify going way beyond what every other standing committee has done with respect to any probe they might be involved in to take the extraordinary measures that are being proposed by the motion. Mr. Chair, teams of professional artists, landscape architects, and other urban design professionals were invited to submit their credentials and examples of their prior work on similar projects as part of a request for qualifications that closed on the 27th of February 2020. 5 teams were shortlisted by a jury of experts in the field of arts and urban design and representatives from key stakeholder groups to develop design concepts for this monument. The design concepts were evaluated by the same jury, made up of experts in the fields of visual arts and urban design and representatives from key stakeholder groups, including a veteran of Canada's mission in Afghanistan, a representative of the families of the fallen, a non-veteran representative of the mission in Afghanistan, and a military historian. And those individuals included Dr. Stephen Boris, who is the director and CEO at the Winnipeg Art Gallery, Virginia Burt, a landscape architect and principal at Virginia Burt Designs, Master Warrant Officer Steve Chagnon, a veteran of Canada's mission in Afghanistan, Ren Sampson Daw, representing the families of the fallen, and 2019 National Memorial Silver Cross Mother, Arif Lalani, Canada's ambassador to the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan during the height of Canada's military and civilian mission, Talbot Sweetapple, architect and partner at McKay Lyons Sweetapple Architects, and Dr. Lee Windsor, the Deputy Director of the Brigadier Milton Gregg VC Center for the Study of War and Society at the University of New Brunswick in Fredericton. The National Monument to Canada's mission in Afghanistan will recognize the commitment and sacrifice of Canadians who served in Afghanistan and the support provided to them at home, and will be a permanent place for Canadians to reflect on their service. The monument will ensure that future generations have the opportunity to learn more about the mission and Canada's efforts in helping to rebuild Afghanistan. We all appreciate and respect the work done by jury members in evaluating the design concepts, their professionalism, and their personal experience. The process to reach this stage of the project was lengthy and included jury deliberations on several design concepts, as well as public opinion research that generated over 10,000 responses, including from Canadian forces and mission veterans and their families. All of those things factored into the decision ultimately arrived at by Veterans Affairs Canada. The Team Stimson design was the one that veterans of the mission and their families felt best represented the bravery, sacrifices, and losses of those who served there. The results of the consultation, which are public, are clear, and Mr. Chair, it is our responsibility, as it was the minister's responsibility, to listen to veterans. And that is at the heart of where we should be focused. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Casey. So now there's no more, and Mr. Sarai, yes, please.
I think we've studied this this topic, the design selection process. We've had the ministry here. We've had the Minister of Heritage here. We've had department officials here. And I just want to remind things. We've had veterans that have come before. I've not heard any veteran either coming to my office or calling or in this committee in this study or others that have said that the selection that the government has finally made with regards to this Team Stimson design has been incorrect. We've heard process problems that, especially from the artistic community, that has been there, but we have not heard from others in regards to that, from the actual people we're trying to see, people who have served. I have not heard anything of significance from that or any uproar. I was spent 3 days, I think, in a Veterans Summit, which my colleague Mr. Desolé as well attended, of stakeholders of veterans in Montreal. And again, people wanted the monument to move forward, but I did not hear of objection to the design selected or design otherwise. So therefore, I think the amendment that my colleague has proposed is very valid, and we should move forward with that.
Merci, Monsieur Sarai. Et maintenant,
Thank you, Mr. Sarai, and I'll give the floor to Mr. Desilets. Over to you. Well, listen, I understand that the Liberals don't intend to vote today. Chair, you talked about how to proceed earlier, but as Vice Chair, I think that we can take a look at the agenda, and I'm saddened by it. I think that the next meeting ought to focus on the current subject And the next meetings, until such time as this is solved, is just a motion. If the Liberals decide to filibuster, that's their right to do so. It's in democracy that is done. It's not correct, but it's done. And I would just like to say something, Mr. Sorry, you didn't hear from the veterans? Well, that's not the way veterans do things, to raise their hand and say, no, I don't agree with the monument. You're coming back once again, Mr. Casey, such an intelligent man that you are. Yes, indeed. And you return once again to the survey. I would just like to read you a little sentence or paragraph from it, because the government itself recognized that the survey had no value. You keep saying that it's valuable in 10,000 people and all that, but you don't believe in léger, then demolish that. No problem. I'll read this out. This is a document from directors of Veterans Affairs, in an email from November 2021 said the following. Yes, look at me in the eyes, Mr. Casey. The survey did not ask the respondents to rank their choices. According to the interpretation of the question by the respondents, they may or may not have chosen more than one model. As an example, there is no way of knowing which one they preferred or to what degree they preferred one over another. So that's someone from the department, a manager with a high position in the department, who is telling us in black and white. These are documents that we sent for, and you can see how relevant it is to ask for documents in order to be able to have a clear view of that whole process, because it really is not clear. So we have someone from Veterans Affairs who disagrees with the survey that you defend so vehemently. And another question to the minister at the time, is it possible to demonstrate that a single female veteran responded to that survey? And you, of course, you listened to the minister. The minister said, no, I'm not able to confirm that. In fact, there was nothing that showed what was the gender or a number of other aspects. You referred earlier to the fact that people in the national capital asked for. Yes, that's statistically, it doesn't make sense. They don't represent 25% of the population. You talked about French-speaking people at 12% in the survey, the so-called survey. Don't even want to call it a survey. 12% that represent a much higher percent of the population. So it's not relevant what the opposition is asking you say, and the documents that they want. Somewhere along the line, you want to stretch out the work. You don't want to hear in the short term from women or men veterans. That's your choice. Anyway, once again, someone from the department, a high-ranking official, said it didn't make sense. But keep on defending your survey. That's all, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Desilets. And now, Ms. Hefner. Thank you, Chair.
That we should be having at my previous committee on heritage, because it feels like a debate between artist communities and artists rather than really being here about veterans.
Point of order. Mr. Tolmie. Mr. Tolmie, yes, please.
Mr. Chair, the gallery is full of Afghan vets, and not once has my Liberal colleagues here acknowledged them in the room or apologized for filibustering and delaying this for 2
Mr.
hours.
Tolmie.
It's a point of order. Is that a point of order?
Apologizing
Yes,
and relevance
and relevance
to the
you,
motion.
But point of order.
And
There's
relevance
not
to
a
the
point
motion.
of order. But we are talking around the motion, so let's keep talking around the motion
No, talk
tabled by
about the motion.
Mr. Casey. Please.
Mr. President, I would like to move that we adjourn debate on this motion so we can get back to talking about the things that veterans really want us to talk about.
OK. Alors, nous allons passer au vote.
All right, so we will vote as to whether we adjourn the debate on this motion. Is that it? Yes, there. So I would ask the clerk to please proceed with the vote to adjourn the debate on this motion of amendment.
En faveur. Ms. Hefner. Mr. May.
Yes.
Mr. Miao.
In favor.
Mr. Sarai.
In favor.
Mr. Doddle,
Opposed?
Mr. Richards,
Opposed.
Mr. Tolmy. Ms. Morgenthau,
Opposed.
Mr. Desilets,
Contre.
Ms. Blaney.
Opposed?
Yes pour 5, 5.
Please, yeah.
Nays contre 6, 6.
Merci. Donc, Madame.
Thank you, Ms. Hefner. So the motion was defeated. We shall continue the debate. Ms. Wagenthal?
I would make a motion that we vote on the amendment before us on the floor. We've heard from these members multiple times, reading what's already in the record. I think in respect for the veterans that are in this room and watching and are calling for, as they say, action, that they agree and we vote on the amendment.
Thank you. I heard that.
A point of order, I think as long as there's a speaking list, you can't move on to put it to a vote.
Exactly. If we have more members like to talk about the motion, we're gonna discuss it. So, are there any other intervention on the motion table by Mr. Casey regarding Erin O'Toole? No? Okay. So I'm gonna ask the clerk, or maybe I can say, are there any objection to adopt the amendment tabled by Sean Casey inviting Erin O'Toole? Okay, no objection. Perfect. So let's move on. So motion amendment adopted. Great. Yeah. So now go back.
Let's just hope we can get to the
Mr.
vote and have
Casey.
no more filibustering.
Mr. Casey, yes, we're listening.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je veux,
Thank you,
présenter
Chair. I want to make a few comments on the motion as amended. And Chair, I find it aberrant that the members of the opposition refuse to produce documents that would have enabled us to get correspondence concerning the jury, and that now they want to obtain something specific regarding the jury. I would like to give them the benefit of the doubt, but it seems that my opposition colleagues only want to obtain those documents that they think are aligned with the narrative that they're attempting to construct. They do not want to hear from veterans, nor even the opinions that are in favor of the final choice, that is to say, the design from the Stimson team. And yet, this is a monument which honors veterans, a commemorative national monument of the Canadian mission to Afghanistan will acknowledge the commitment and sacrifice of Canadian men and women who served in Afghanistan, as well as the support that was given them by Canadians back home. The monument will also reflect the profound gratitude of Canada toward the sacrifice given by persons who served in Afghanistan, including those who lost their lives or were injured either physically or psychologically. The monument will serve as a public space to remind us forever of the altruistic service of Canadians to the country, and will honor coming generations and enable them to learn more about this specific moment of the history of our armed forces. We are aware that the jury's decision was not unanimous, in contrast to what my colleague stated in the House. The jury did a remarkable job to select the 5 finalist concepts, and we all agree with that. As project leader in the role of Veterans Affairs Canada is to listen to veterans, and the role of Veterans Affairs Canada is to listen to veterans, and that is what we did. Veterans Affairs Canada received comments from more than 10,000 Canadians regarding the concepts for this monument, and the veterans, their families, and others who participated in that mission are mainly those who commented on those concepts. The concept from the Stimson team most accurately reflects the comments from veterans or families, as well as other participants in that mission during our public opinion consultation. And it is really essential to listen to veterans and to honor their choice.
As a final comment before I cede the floor, Mr. Chair, I spent 17 years of my professional life practicing law, primarily in the area of civil litigation. It is inevitable that this particular dispute is headed to the courts. And perhaps that's rightly where it should be. This exercise in attempt to go on a fishing expedition to try to pin it to the Prime Minister is a further example of Trudeau derangement syndrome. To the extent that this is to be prosecuted, that the weaknesses in the procedure, that the allegations of failure to follow the rules, these are truly legal matters that are rightly dealt with in a court of law. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Kissy. And once again, members of the committee, it's approaching 1 o'clock. And once again, I'd like to know, the witnesses that we are talking about on Wednesday, they are having arrangement to be here. So if I don't have unanimous consent, we're going to tell them that they cannot appear on Wednesday. That's the basic of that, because, yeah, but first of all,
Can you try one more time for unanimous consent to carry on until 2 o'clock so we can get this dealt with, so that Wednesday won't be an issue then?
Yeah.
Well, we're trying, I'm asking for us to try another time for unanimous consent.
I
Maybe
will-
the Liberals have had time to reflect.
Well,
possibly,
Mr. Desilets first, yes?
Monsieur le Président, peut-être que je l'ai dit tantôt.
Chair, what I said earlier, I would suggest that unfortunately, the witnesses be postponed. Colleagues, you can bear the burden of that, and I'm going to make the same motion over and over again if I need to, because we need to come to the end of this. We need a certain minimum transparency. The motion table is not the end of the world, my gosh. And if the Liberals really want us to take care of veterans, that we listen and that we do the studies that we have ahead of us, my gosh, put some water in your wine. Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. May on the Zoom. Please, Mr. May.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not speaking for all of the folks on my side. They can speak for themselves, but I certainly want to get back to the study at hand and have witnesses appear. I think it's clear what the priority is from the opposition, and if they want to continue to disrupt these meetings and the work of this committee, that's up to them. But I do not agree that we should cancel the witnesses on Wednesday. I think they should be here. We need to continue to do the work that folks sent us here to do, and not engage in this deep sea fishing exercise any further. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I'd like to know that if I have unanimous consent to adjourn the meeting.
What about 1:30?
Just a second.
I would-
Mr. Richards.
I would like to ask unanimous consent that we can continue the meeting till 2 o'clock so we can get that matter at hand dealt with.
Okay, once again, I'd like to ask members of the committee if they are agree with the motion provided by Mr. Richards to go until 2 o'clock. There is no unanimous consent. So now I'm back to you guys. Do I have unanimous consent to adjourn the meeting?
Motion to adjourn. It's at 1 o'clock.
Motion to adjourn, so we're going to take the vote. So I ask the clerk to take the vote to adjourn the meeting or not, because
We take the vote.
yeah.
Mr. Casey? To adjourn? In favor?
In favor.
Ms. Hefner?
Favor.
Mr. May?
Yes.
Mr. Miao?
In favor.
Mr. Sarai?
In favor.
Mr. Dodo?
Opposed.
Mr. Richards?
Opposed.
Mr. Tony?
Opposed.
Ms. Warrenton?
Opposed?
Monsieur Desilets?
Contre.
Ms. Blaney?
Opposed.
So,
Yes pour 5, nays contre 6.
okay, donc, j'ai Monsieur Désilets.
All
qui
right,
veut-
so I have Mr. Desiree who wishes to speak. I wish to ask to suspend the meeting.
Est-ce que vous voulez suspendre?
So you wish to suspend for a few minutes or to return Wednesday, Mr. Desiree? To return.
Pour revenir mercredi.
Suspend to return Wednesday? Yes.
Oui, Monsieur Désilets, c'est
Yes, Mr. Desiree, this is possible. Having consulted,
doit demander le vote
I have to ask for a vote to suspend the meeting to return Wednesday to continue this discussion.
On a bien compris, donc,
Everyone understood very well. So before I ask the clerk,
est-ce que j'ai le consentement
do I have unanimous consent to suspend this meeting and resume Wednesday at the time planned for our meeting?
Ouais. OK. Donc,
Yes, okay, very well.
la réunion est suspendue.
The meeting is suspended.